Hey everyone, welcome to More Layers for the beginning of June 2023. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith. We also apologize for how long it took us to do this particular episode. A couple times Seth went away or I was busy with something, but now we're finally here and we are ready.
It's been, well, I don't mean this to sound negative, but it's been a pretty restful couple weeks or so away from this. As Jordan kind of hinted at, I took a couple trips, one to Florida, one to Pennsylvania, and yeah, some nice little time away from my day job and a chance to get away, take a little load off, if you will. But it's good to be home and good to be back in the swing of this show, nonetheless.
Oh, for sure. I am very excited about this one.
Yeah, yeah. So I came across a little link, and I'll post in the description later about a new ice cream that is that first appeared about a couple years ago, oh, in McDonald's in Singapore, Malaysia, and the Philippines, and it's called the Sea Salt McFlurry.
Yeah, when you first sent that to me, I didn't really know what to think because to me, putting salt in the same name as McFlurry, at face value, it doesn't sound very good to me at all. But then I thought about it, did a little bit of research on what's actually in it, and I'm wondering if the sea salt is there to kind of balance out the sweetness of the McFlurry itself.
Well, I was just thinking, how Dairy Queen has the salted caramel blizzard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, so it wouldn't be something completely foreign if it were using sea salt or something like that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I know. A lot of cases I would think, salty and sweet don't go that good together. I mean, like, I don't know. I was a bit skeptical, like the first time recently I tried pad thai, which is an Asian dish, a kind of a noodle thing, a thing with a sort of peanut sauce.
Okay.
But it actually turned out to be pretty good. Good. I must be honest, I actually liked it.
So you had a chance to try it, or
Yeah, yeah, it was
okay?
something new that I knew that my mom kind of wanted to try, so I figured, all right, whatever, all right, I'll give it a whirl, and it turned out to be actually pretty good.
See, I'm surprised it's here because when I was doing my research on this McFlurry, it looked like it was only going to be available in a lot of a lot of Asian countries. But did it actually come to North America?
Um, well, apparently, interestingly, someone actually was quoted in the article saying, "I thought it was going to come to America."
And I guess it did.
I,
Not,
I don't know whether or not it did, but it would it said like someone else said, I hate on Facebook that it shows me these ads for this overseas ice cream because I really want that. So I'm not sure whether or not it's in the US.
I was about to say I hadn't heard that it was, but maybe it is, or maybe it will, and we just haven't heard about it yet. I feel like they should, because why would they not? But they might have their reasons. Um, yeah, if it is in North America at some point, I would like to try it at least once because I mean, it looks good. Um, from what I've seen, it sounds good. Uh, I don't know if it would be something I would get all the time, but I would like to try it at least once. So if they bring it, I'll try it.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe, at least bring it to Canada, I'll go at least that far for it, probably. But,
Sure.
Did you know in Canada, they actually at McDonald's have what they call the double Big Mac with 4 patties instead of 2?
See, I feel like that's what the Big Mac should look like anyway. And I don't know if it's because I grew up and got bigger, but I feel like over time, the Big Mac itself got smaller and it shouldn't even be called the Big Mac at this point, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I do kind of feel like it well, might have shrunk considerably. I don't know. I don't know if it's a response to health criticisms or whatever. But yeah, I do think it seems to have considerably shrunken, but that could be just me.
It could be. I mean, it certainly looks like it did to me. Like there's less in it now, but it could just be because I got older. Um, yeah, the Galaxy Sea Salt Galaxy Swirl McFlurry. Again, I do want to try it at least once, and I think they kind of doubled down on the Galaxy thing because when I was looking stuff up about this, apparently, um, I think it was official. They made a picture where this McFlurry was a parody of R2D2 in honor of Star Wars Day.
Yeah, and if that's not enough to get a lot of you to look at this, well, I don't know what is.
It's at least look up the picture because then not only do you see this adorable R2D2 parody, but you can also get a good idea as to what this McFlurry would look like.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. It kind of looks like, um, sort of like that cotton candy Dairy Queen Blizzard, which I've never
Yeah,
had personally. Yeah, it's got that kind of color going for it. Yeah.
it kind of does.
Yeah.
It's got some blue and purple in there, I believe. Um, and I'm thinking at this point, if it's not coming to the US now, it could just be in some sort of experiment phase where they're kind of testing it out to see how popular it is in whatever countries they're in. And then if it does well enough, maybe then they will expand to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Possibly.
Yeah, I don't know entirely, but I'm kind of hoping it does. Because I remember when McDonald's briefly brought back I think it's pronounced Szechuan, like Szechuan sauce, something like that.
Szechuan sauce.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they brought that back. I think it was in connection to Rick and Morty for some reason. I haven't seen the show, so I can't say what the connection is. But
Oh,
I
I know
remember.
that story actually, because they actually referenced in a specific episode of that show, that there was this special Szechuan McNugget dipping sauce that they made as a promotional tie-in for Disney's Mulan back in the 90s.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, because I remember when they brought it back, it kind of took the world by storm for a little bit. So maybe doing something like that with this McFlurry will do the same.
Yeah, I think I heard like somebody like sold a packet of it on eBay for like tens of thousands or something.
I am not surprised because if you get your hands on a rare item, people are going to upsell it for a ridiculous amount just because they know how desperate people are at the time to get their hands on it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Dairy Queen, just last weekend, just this past weekend before we're recording this, Jordan and I actually went to a Dairy Queen shop in our town and got some ice cream. And um, I got the Oreo Brookie Blizzard, which is probably one of the most bizarre things you might ever see anywhere. But I don't know, the most bizarre, but it was good enough.
I would hope so because if it
Yeah.
wasn't, then it's certainly
Yeah.
not worth spending money on.
No.
Um, Yeah, I was thinking about getting the Oreo one, and then I saw that they had, I think it was chocolate chip and cookie dough, like cookie dough and something else, but it was really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the weekend before that, when we went to a another sort of little mom and pop type or whatever small business ice cream place in our town, the flavor I got was cookie dough.
Is that Luigia's?
Yeah,
Okay, I was about to say, because I know you and I went there at one point, and I've been to another small one called Vic's, not too far from where we are, that's also really good, but I think I went with somebody else that time.
yeah. I went with a bunch of friends of mine once to Vic's myself, so I'm familiar with it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I was a little curious, so today I asked on Facebook, what is the most interesting restaurant item you've ever eaten? I got one response. One person said, not really a specific item, but they said Papa Joe's, a restaurant in our hometown, and they cited like huge portion serving size as kind of the reasoning. And so they said like the portions were big. I subsequently looked up some images on the website, and yeah, yeah, it is pretty big from what I can tell.
Yeah, I don't recall going to Papa Joe's, at least not any time in recent memory. Um, but I do appreciate when they have large portions, because then I feel like you're getting your money's worth when you pay for something like that. Like again, going back to Luigia's, they have great quality ice cream, but they also give you large portions and you get your money's worth. Like a small, quote unquote, is three scoops stacked on top of each other, and a large is like five. So Papa Joe's, Luigia's, any business that gives you exactly what you paid for, if not more, they have my respect.
Yeah, yeah, it's difficult to find that kind of value just anywhere, but I'll say there have been some multiple places, like not just well, more than one place that I've been pretty pleased with the value, the size of. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, and I think one place I think we got our money's worth was at Skyline Chili, which is I've mentioned this to you. I think I've briefly talked to you about it before. We're a place where they have this old recipe Ohio chili, and they put it on spaghetti, hot dogs, and I got the three-way spaghetti dish, which was good.
I think I've tried something very similar to that at home before, but I don't think I've tried it out in a restaurant, diner, or anything like that. So I may have to actually go out soon and do that.
Well, I know there's like there are like cans of chili you can buy. I don't know if you can get them just anywhere. Maybe you have to go to Ohio or something to get them, but yeah, but yeah, it is worth the try. I think at least.
Yeah, if there's a local place that does something similar, yeah, I might give it a go.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that may be probably the most interesting or outrageous dish that I've probably eaten in my life.
Okay.
Aside, either that or maybe the loaded curly fries. It's kind of an interesting story because it might have been while we were reeling from the COVID pandemic, and Jordan was working at Arby's, and they were giving away bracelets for our friend's local nonprofit Campaign D. And so now I eventually, well, to be clear, I didn't actually know you could only get them at the one where Jordan works. So I ended up going to one and getting the loaded curly fries, and then I go I go to the one Jordan's working at, and I get a bracelet and a milkshake. So
Well, that is definitely appreciated because we're definitely trying to spread the awareness. The place where I work at now, I don't know if I have a way to do that. I could ask if they'd be up for it, but I don't know how they would distribute them considering it's a much bigger building. But yeah, there's no harm in asking, so I probably will at some point if I remember.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, and so uh, we'll go ahead to the next question, which is um, a deeper, sort of curious question of what are some movies and shows you think were ahead of their times, meaning they showed things more relevant to or prevalent in later times, or they expressed ideas that were revolutionary for their eras?
Yeah, this was a fun one to think about. I really had to sort through all the movies I'd seen before and come up with a decent list. I admittedly did put one or two on mine that I haven't seen, but that was because when I was looking up some other examples and they gave some summaries that I feel like are still applied now, I felt like they deserved some attention. So the first one I thought of is a movie. I think there's two separate versions, but I'm thinking of the original because I think I watched that one. But it's one called 12 Angry Men. And the idea of this film is that it's a jury can twist consisting of 12 men, of course, because given the title, and they're trying to decide if somebody is guilty or not. And they have to come to a unanimous decision. And so, right at the beginning, all but one of them say he's guilty. And a lot of them are saying that just so they can get out of there faster. And I feel like that's an issue that is still very relevant now because a lot of people, I can't think of too many people that are actually excited to be assigned to jury duty or something similar. So as a result, they probably would want to get the trial over with as soon as possible so they can leave. And as a result, there's that risk of a lot of evidence being overlooked or just ignored. And that could cause the wrong verdict to be reached, resulting in a person who may actually be innocent be found guilty for no reason and they could suffer for it. So it's like
Yeah, that's good.
this movie covered that problem a while ago. And I feel like it's still a problem now.
Yeah. Well, I can't really speak from experience. I mean, I got pretty close to getting called for jury duty myself, but I ended up getting excused for personal reasons. But yeah, well, and I actually saw this film myself as part of a class lesson in high school. So I was familiar with it fairly myself, and I actually did a little paper analyzing it for the class. So I'm acquainted with it too.
Yeah, I think I did something similar in college, and I don't remember if it was a film class, a theater class, or even my debate class that I had. But I do remember having to watch it at least once for very similar reasons.
Yeah,
A very solid movie. I recommend people check it out. It mostly takes place in one room, but they make the most of it.
yeah.
All right. And then the next one, this is one that I haven't seen. Uh, 1930s, All Quiet on the Western Front. Uh, and I feel like something that, based off what I read about it, one thing that I pulled from it is that not just with war, but many people today are excited to do certain things until they see what comes along with it. Uh, again, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know the whole summary, but it seems like there were people in this film, like the characters, they were really excited to participate in this war or something outside of it. But when they saw how dangerous or how life threatening it was, I could be just spitting out nonsense right now, but this is based off what I remember reading about it. Um, but yeah, once they saw how dangerous it was, they become a lot more hesitant, or even were like, I don't know. Um, and I feel like that happens a lot with many other things in the modern world. Like people will be really excited to try something, but the moment even the slightest inconvenience happens, they kind of shy away from it and be like, never mind.
Yeah, there's like that old saying, "The grass is always greener in someone else's yard," and it can be true a lot of times. I feel like like I kind of had that kind of mentality, like going into the theater group or in Artists Unlimited, but then when I got to see, as I got to have more experience in the group and see firsthand how difficult and complicated it can be, then it I think it really gave me a fresh, more mature perspective.
Yeah, I kind of have something similar to that happen whenever it involves me doing something that makes me nervous, like approaching somebody or like speaking in front of an audience. Go figure, because I'm a theater performer. Um, where it's like when I first go to do it, I could be scared out of my mind. But the moment I finally get started, then I start to warm up to it and I become a lot more comfortable. And I don't even think about how nervous I was about 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember somebody on our pastoral staff said a director once told him, you ever get up on a stage and you've got no nerves at all, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah,
And which
I
I actually
that's
agree with. With I feel like because even just a little bit of nerves can kind of keep your feet on the ground, if you will.
oh for sure. Like it's kind of like being able to feel pain. It's not necessarily something that you want to experience, but it's also kind of necessary because then you know if you're experiencing a lot of pain, you're in a bad situation and you should do something about it immediately. So it could be something like that in a strange way.
Yeah.
And then the next film I thought of, this is another one I haven't seen, but I've thought about it before. 1982's Tron. And the reason I thought of this one is because when scrolling through some other films that were ahead of their time, this one kind of addressed an issue that we certainly face now, especially as time progresses, where from what I understand, it kind of gives a glimpse of showing how dangerous or helpful technology can be. Because, of course, there's a lot of benefits to having certain technology, especially in the medical field, maybe some entertainment industries, and various other platforms. But there are also many times where it can be used for bad things or something that's a lot more dangerous or risky. So it's something that was addressed in the 80s, and now, about 40 years after this movie has come out, it's still very much a problem. In fact, I'd argue that it's more of a problem now than it was then.
I feel like at least some films have kind of touched on that kind of issue since then. Like the specific one that came to my mind was Pixar's Wall-E, which was very much at its core, very much a social commentary, very deep diving into things like consumerism and ism and how that how that affects how people think about themselves and things like that. So yeah, it's Tron though may have been the first of its kind.
It might have been. I don't know if it was the very first, but it was certainly the first one I found.
Yeah.
But it also kind of brought me back to, I think it was Frozen 2, because I think Olaf has a line that has something to do with him saying, technology is both our savior and our doom. I don't remember how the line exactly goes or the context of what led him to say that, but I remember him saying something along that line. And it just shows that even all this time later, it's still very much a problem.
Yeah. I never watched Frozen 2, but that does sound deep though.
It does. And kind of going off to the side for a little bit,
Yeah.
uh, when it comes to Frozen 2 versus the first movie, um, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of either one, but I will say I like the music more in the second one. But that's just me.
Fair.
But not to sidetrack too much, my next entry was yet another one I haven't seen. A film from 1950 called No Way Out. And all I wrote down for this one for a note was that racism is a prominent issue. Uh, and again, this is a movie that came out in 1950. Now we're more than 70 years later, and racism is still very much a prominent issue, especially where we are. Some people will underplay it, some people will overplay it, but regardless, it's still a problem in many ways.
Well, it's certainly a different world than even back in the world of the civil rights era, where nowadays we've got more laws in place that allow blacks and whites and other races to coexist legally, but at the same time, there's a lot of discrimination and unfair treatment still going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, and it just shows that some things haven't changed over a long time that still very much should. But I won't go too deep into it because I know it's a very touchy subject and I don't want to spark any debates right now. Um, so I'll move on to my next entry, which is pretty much the show in general for The Simpsons. I haven't seen a whole lot of it, but I do know that the show, especially in its earlier seasons, was well known to be able to accurately predict some things that happen far into the future. Like The Simpsons predicted some things about technology down to Trump becoming president. Uh, I don't remember how early on that episode was versus how long it took until Trump did become president. Um, but they made several crazy predictions. In fact, I'm pretty sure you can look up varying lists of some of the stuff they've accurately predicted and how far in advance they were able to do it. So I recommend checking that out.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen too many of these instances myself because I haven't really watched much of the show, but it's one of their most well-known qualities.
Yeah, later I may look that up. Like predictions of the future, The Simpsons got right.
Yeah, sure. I recommend it.
Yeah.
Um, then the next one is kind of a group entry because I listed the first three Toy Story films. I haven't seen the fourth one, so I can't speak on that one. And I know they're making a fifth one. I don't know why. Um, but yeah, I put down the first three Toy Story films because they did something that I hadn't really seen any other movie franchise do, and that's how they essentially grew up with their target audience. Because the first two came out in the 90s, whereas the third one I think came out in 2010. So the first two, a lot of people grew up with as young kids. And of course, Andy at the time was a young kid. And then by the time the third one comes around, Andy's going to college. And around that same time, the people who watched the first two originally are also now going to college. So I don't know if that was done on purpose, but the fact that it stuck so well with its target audience, even over the course of a decade or so, it's like I haven't seen anyone else do that. And that was kind of a solid way to connect with the people that especially grew up with the first two.
Yeah, I I think I can attest to that. The first film was released when you know I further back than I can remember. I remember I saw the first when it was released, and I was very young at the time. And then as a kid, I went and saw the second one, and then and then when the third was out, I was late into high school, and then by the time by the time the fourth was out, I was grown and probably working. So yeah, I think I can attest to that.
Just shows how strong a story can be if you connect with your target audience very well.
Yeah.
Then the last one I wrote down is one that I haven't seen in a little while, but it still has stuck with me ever since I first saw it. And that is, I think it was 1988 when it came out. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was around that time. Uh, a film called Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And this is a film where a cartoon rabbit interacts with this real life person to and they together somehow figure out who killed this guy's brother. And I put this one down because it honestly really paved the way for blending live action with animation. And the effects even now hold up really well. Like so many films now, they like to put animated characters in a real world, whether it be 2D or through CGI, or they'll take something that was originally animated and make it into live action. I'm looking at Disney on that one. Um,
I was thinking of Fat Albert. When they did that for
yeah,
the Fat Albert movie.
like he literally jumps through the TV into the real world.
Yeah,
Um,
with his buddies.
yeah, exactly. And I feel like a lot of movies that come out that now put that together uh, really what's the word I'm trying to think of? They owe a lot to Who Framed Roger Rabbit because I really think they're one of the first ones to do it. I could be wrong, but they did it in a very solid fashion and it still looks really good now. So I feel like more movies, if they're going to do something like that going forward, they should take a lot of inspiration from this movie.
Arguably, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you could probably say, paved the way for later films like the Space Jams and Looney Tunes Back in Action, and uh, one that recently came out, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie.
Yep.
So, yeah. So, yeah.
That was all of mine.
Okay. So, yeah, I thought of a few. The first one that I thought of was one that I just mentioned, purely coincidental though, Space Jam. And um, if you know the movie, there's the whole plot line where after some of the basketball stars get their talents extracted from them by the cartoon aliens. There's like a quarantine at the Lakers court, and then eventually the league pretty much indefinitely cancels the rest of the season. Which the more I thought about it, and because I'd seen, I won't specify, a YouTube video that kind of dove deep into this movie. It made me think, man, that sounds a lot like what the COVID situation was. You know?
Yeah, in a very similar fashion. Like, I'm sure people don't want to think too much back on the whole quarantine situation over the past few years, but Space Jam, particularly the first one, came out a while ago, and they
Yeah,
tackled something that really became an issue, at least where we are, much later on.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if anybody thought that was eventually going to become a real situation in the real world, but eventually it did, though.
Yeah, more than once.
Yeah, yeah. I take, and then I thought of this is kind of an example that's been cited, I think, by writers in the past. Back to the Future Part Two, and writers have talked about uh, how this specific movie in the series, correctly predicted the future of technology. We see in a portion of the film where Marty is in the future world and seeing his future self from a distance. You see things like video calling, a large screen, wall mounted TV, maybe some other stuff we have now. So stuff that, as far as I know, hadn't been invented back yet, like at the time of this film, but it is stuff that now is kind of normal and very prevalent.
And wasn't it the Back to the Future films that almost correctly predicted who would win the World Series many years later?
Yeah, there is a kind of a little gag there that says like I think they go to the future or something, and it says the Cubs have won the World Series.
And they had specified a particular year, and I remember that because when that year came, the Cubs almost actually did it. They did end up not winning the World Series that year, but the fact that the Back to the Future films almost got it right decades before was absolutely insane, and it drove a lot of people crazy in a good way.
And I think that they may have only been off by 1 year because I think a 2015 was the future year they traveled to and they won it in 2016.
I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, uh, that's one. And I take, and then this is not something I necessarily watched, but I got like the rundown on it from other videos. It was an episode of SpongeBob called Fungus Among Us. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Is that the one where they get infected with something called the ick?
Yes, yes, the
Okay, yeah, I
green
know which
egg.
one you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And eventually it spreads and he ends up being kind of quarantined in a bubble of sorts and so yeah, another like COVID parallel or medical scare parallel to the real world there.
Sure. And then I think by the end of the episode, it turns out to be something that Gary likes to eat, so he helped cure everybody by getting rid of it himself. Um, Granted, that's not something that we could have necessarily done. Uh, but yeah, just how it parallels some of the issues that we faced personally. Like we had to stay away from people, and of course, everybody was getting sick with something, even if they were subjected to it in a very minor way. May not be the most relatable presentation of it, but it certainly still got some things right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And then I put down Pixar's Monsters Incorporated. like if you know like the climax of that movie, we have the guy who is introduced to us as like the boss of the scare factory is going to cruel extremes and actually trying to abduct a kid in order to save the company's bottom line.
Yeah, he's a perfect example of somebody who will stop at nothing to get what they want or keep something that they have afloat. And like you said, he kidnaps a child, uh, and he abuses at some point, uh, pretty much his star employee, like the top worker there. Um, and he even says near the end, when it comes to kidnapping children, he's like, "I will do it thousands of times before I let this company die." It's like that just shows you how much of an extreme some people will go to when they've become mad with power and they don't want to lose it.
Yeah. And then and I know you mentioned the Toy Stories earlier. I put down the first Toy Story specifically.
Okay.
I've thought a lot about of how early on you had the rivalry between Woody and Buzz Lightyear, and how in a way Woody was kind of like the old fashioned cowboy doll, and all, and Buzz Lightyear's like this modern high tech space toy. And I feel like, and eventually, of course, if you know the progression of the franchise, I'd say they eventually like learn to respect each other, come together as one team, and coexist, and work together to get done what needed to be done. And to think about how there's very much a clash, a lot of intense debate, like between like conservative views and more modern views, and some people are like very purist and want to stick to old school, and there are others who are like like we got to think forward, we got to reinvent and how some things are done. And you know there may be some truth to both sides, but there is an intense kind of rivalry, I think, between the two.
Oh, for sure. And that whole issue kind of gets a callback, if that's the right word, in the second film after Woody is in Al's apartment and he's talking with these other toys from his Roundup gang. And the prospector even says, once the astronauts went up, children only wanted to play with space toys. And even Woody was like, yeah, I know how that feels.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it can just be fueled by resentment.
Oh, it definitely can, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then there's a film that I watched, I think twice, Ghostbusters. And there's, if you know, there's a plot line of these guys are dealing with this paranormal activity around New York that's kind of threatening the city, and there's some people in political power in the area who kind of want to restrict what they're doing. But even while the Ghostbusters are giving them legit warnings and legit heads up about how dangerous these things are, but they just pretty much kind of brush it off. And, and this is something that has happened in the real world. I think of like the events leading up to the Challenger shuttle disaster, and even the um, whole idea of the government ignoring legitimate warnings was even the focus of the hit film that came out recently, though I didn't see it, called Don't Look Up.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but then
go ahead.
yep, yeah. Well, I was just saying, so in a way, Ghostbusters I think was ahead of its time.
I would definitely say so. And even if it's not comparing governments in reaction to what scientists are telling them, it can be generalized even further where a lot of people they'll be warned to not do something or not say something because it'll yield a certain result. And so many people, they will foolishly respond with, "Oh, it's okay. It won't happen to me." Or they think the chances are just so low that they pretty much ignore even the distinct possibility that it could still happen to them. And it can be something as big as government ignoring warnings from scientists, right down to something simple like not wearing a helmet when you're going on a bike because you don't think you're gonna like fall over and hit your head.
No, no, I wouldn't drive a race car without a helmet.
Oh, I
Bike
certainly
without a
wouldn't.
helmet at your own risk.
I mean, even with all the safety gear, uh, race cars can still be very dangerous. Just look at
Yeah,
the late Dale Earnhardt Sr.
yeah,
Um, he died as a result of an accident in a car race, even with all the gear that he had.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
still very much want to be careful.
Well, some might argue that was because he had an old-fashioned open-face helmet and he fractured his skull, but but even that might have even a visor or whatever might not have been enough. I don't know to prevent it.
It's kind of hard to say. But
Yeah,
regardless, he still had a lot of gear, and despite that, he still suffered a very unfortunate fate.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I had just one more. I thought of Harry Potter. I know you're not that familiar with the franchise. I'm not the most familiar with it myself, so it might be difficult for you to give any comment on this. But I recently, when I was in Florida, because I was in Orlando, and I went to the spent some of my time there at Universal theme parks, and you know how they have that Harry Potter land over there,
Yep.
and so my dad thought, why don't we watch a little Potter to kind of prepare ourselves for the whole Harry Potter park experience was kind of my dad's suggestion the first night we were there. And so we watched the first one, and I'm watching, the sequence with the Quidditch game, and you can see some players, they're kind of literally clashing bodies or or knocking opponents out of their way, and no one's throwing a flag or anything, and feel like that's something that's kind of, I think, I have a feeling, has since happened in real sports, athletes dirty play going unpunished.
Oh, it absolutely has. I can tell you, the refs in the NFL especially have sometimes been absolutely notorious for calling something that shouldn't have been, or they missed something somehow that was completely obvious to everybody else. And it's like sometimes players will get away with something they very definitely should not have, whether what they did was intentional or not. Uh, but it's not just football, it can happen in any other sport or even in a school setting. There could be some jerk that does something really bad that they really never get disciplined for one reason or another. Like when I was in middle school, there was a kid that would sometimes get physical with me and it would hurt. Uh, but one of his parents was on the staff, so he was able to get away with a lot more than he should have.
Yeah, yeah. That's like I think about, examples like the no flag call on the Rams, or what was
Mhm.
the other one I was thinking of? Well, not exactly a sports example, but uh, Trump having all this unapologetic history of controversial comments, and even maybe some controversial behavior, and still winning the White House in 2016. It's just it's not a fair world.
Nope.
Things happen, and it's it's um it's unfortunate. I don't know why, but it's yeah,
It's whether in sports or out of it, there are just so many times where somebody will say or do something that they shouldn't, and they somehow get away with it, and it upsets a lot of people. It's a very prominent issue now. It certainly was back then. Uh, well, hopefully, more often in the future, people will get what's coming to them should they deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether in this life or the next, I'm sure it's going to happen. I think it's pretty much not much, I think, guaranteed in God's word that even if it's not in this life, it'll happen in the next anyway.
Yeah, at some point in the future, regardless of when or where, everybody will eventually have to answer for the stuff they did.
Well, well, I believe it's going to keep getting worse until eventually the new heaven and earth come, but well, we just do the best we can.
Yeah, do the best we can and encourage others to do the same, and hopefully bring as many people with us as possible when we go to meet God face to face.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and maybe share with us some like the most interesting or outrageous or bizarre whatever restaurant food items you've had, or maybe some examples of pop culture you thought was ahead of its time, like we talked about. And keep up with us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Facebook, YouTube, and Anchor. And keep in touch with us, and your questions, comments, suggestions, and we would really appreciate it.
Yeah, any sort of interaction we have with our audience is great. Anytime we get comments or answers to questions that we ask the public about, it really helps us expand because we don't want to just resort to the two of us talking the whole time. We want to implement more what people have to say so that they can feel more involved. They feel like what they're saying matters. So really, anything you want to tell us or ask us, do not be shy. Feel more than free to reach out to us.
Thanks again, everybody, and y'all take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon.
Happy June, everybody.